It was one of those days. I guess my dad would describe it as dreary. We had overcast, it was cloudy, it was a wind chill that would cut right through you. And stepping out of the car, the pain in my knees and my elbows and one look at the sky tells me, yep, this time the weatherman's got it right. It was a call for rain and it was just around the corner. But the pain in my joints was nothing to compare to the pain in my heart. You see, I'm entering Hardin Memorial Hospital to say goodbye to a dying friend. As I pass by the lobby, I'm thinking, there's been too many of these lately. Standing at the elevator door, my thoughts are, what an awkward situation this is. I'm not going to mention the word death, neither is he, but we both know the Grand Reaper is staring straight into his eyes. Elevator door opens, 3 passengers exit, and I, as the lone passenger, push button number 4. And on the way up, my thoughts are this. I want him to know how much I love him. I want him to know how good a friend he's been all my life. Maybe, just maybe, I can seduce a small smile, or better yet, a laugh. When the door opens, I take those 20-some steps to his room. I stop in the open doorway, and I could see family members gathering around the bed. But between 2 of those family members, I could see his eyes. Eyes that would best be described as Dad's weather outside, dreary. But there was a contrast in those eyes that I'd seen one time before. October the 28th, 1988, one day before my dad passed away. It was a contrast of both happiness and sadness. Sad because they knew they were soon going to be losing and leaving their family, friends, and loved ones. But happiness because they knew they had a better place to go. The family turned and acknowledged my presence with a smile, a nod, a wave. And I started walking forward towards the bed. 2 family members parted, leaving me ample room to reach the head of the bed. And there, I looked into the eyes of Stanley Fry. Those dreary eyes turned into a sparkle. A smile come across his face. He said, I'm glad you're here. I've been thinking about the Bonnieville bombers. Some things I'm unsure of. I got some questions for you. I pulled up a chair and I said, Stanley, that's what I'm here for. And then I become amazed. Simply amazed. Simply blew away the knowledge this guy had of my ball teams, of my ball players, of my management style, of the teams that we had played, the competition that we had played, the players we had played against, the games we had played, and the games within the game. He started out, you remember that catch that Gary McDowell made against Terry Hoke Coca-Cola that saved that game? I nodded yes. He said, I've always wondered, why was he playing so shallow? Stanley, if you remember, Ray had pitched to Jewell, hadn't he? We were ahead 1-0. It was the last of the 7th. They had runners on 2nd and 3rd. And they had that good left-hand hitting second baseman up that hit the ball right up the middle a lot. But the runner on 2nd, which was the winning run, was their shortstop who could fly. Gary knew this. Gary knew he had played shallow enough to be able to cut down the run that was going to beat us. So he also knew that he had Norman Riggs catching, that Norman was going to block that plate. But he had to play that shallow, otherwise, you know, the run was going to score and beat us. But it didn't work out that way, did it? Stanley said, no, because that guy hit it halfway up on the bank. And I'm sitting there the minute he hits it, Gary's got no change. Game is over. He turned, I'll never forget this, Gary turned and he started running. He never looked back. He just kept running, and I'm looking, I'm thinking, he is outrunning the ball. He is going to catch up with the ball. It's not going to do him any good because he don't know where the ball's at. He's never turned around. Halfway up on the bank, he jumps, leaps, throws up that glove, and it falls right in it. Do you remember that? Just like it was yesterday, Stanley. Just, wasn't that the greatest catch you ever seen in your life? Actually, he made one better than that. 1959, 69 state tournament. We were playing team called Port Royal. We were ahead 6-4. And they had up to bat with the bases loaded, their pitcher. They called him the preacher from Baghdad. Actually was a Methodist preacher, and he was a great ball player, great pitcher, good hitter, and even better person. We'd never played him before. We didn't know how he hit. And he hits this shot to left center. Game's over. It's over the fence. Nothing we can do about it. Gary takes off. He catches the ball over the fence. He was running so hard he ran through the wall and through the fence. The umpire comes out and throws that hand that he's out. And now here he is all tangled up and wrapped up in wire and walls and fences and everything else. The runner on third tags up and score. The runner on second had run to third because he thought the game was over. Now he runs back to second to tag up to try to score. Gary comes out of there with all that wood and everything hanging, throws a perfect strike into third base. The runner had to go back and we won the game. Now that one, Stanley, that's the greatest one I've ever seen. And I'm not, in my lifetime, I don't think I'll ever see anything equal to it. Stanley would say, Gary McDowell, man, was he something else. Yeah. I didn't get to see that. No, I missed that one, but I heard about it. Do you remember the time Freddie Hodges hit that shot over the bank, over the road, in front of Ed Hawks' house? And this kid had took his girlfriend out for a ride on the horse. She was sitting on the back of him, holding on to his waist, and they went riding. And that ball hit the horse in the butt and bounced all the way back down, rolling back down the fence, and they almost threw Freddie Hodges out at the plate. I was sitting there saying, Freddie, you gotta hurry, you gotta hurry, you gotta hurry, you gotta hurry. And Freddie was in his home run trot, and he's looking at me, Coach, why should I hurry? I hit the ball 4 miles. Now he looks and he sees the ball. He turns on his afterburners, and he barely made it home. But Stanley, you know what I remember more than anything else about that? That horse jumped that high off the ground, and those kids stayed on there. How they ever stayed on there, I'll never know. Now the laughter and the intensity has picked up so much that the grandchildren got involved. They pulled up a seat, and Todd and Cindy, and they were just, their eyes are going back and forth, just like they were watching a tennis match. Papa would ask a question, Randall would answer it, Randall would make a statement, Papa would make a statement, and back and forth their little eyes would go. And when their Papa would laugh, the smile on those grandbabies' faces is worth all the gold in the world. It was about this time I thought Stanley needed a shot of feel-good medicine. So I looked at the kids and I said, now you grandkids don't know this, but your Papa could flat out play. He was one of the last of the old figure 8 pitchers. And he played on the Bonnieville team that played in the old Dixie League, the 31W Fast Pitch League. There was like 16 teams in this league. And it was people like your dad, the Frys, the Clausens, the Highballs, the Gettys, the Wallachs, the Pences, the Jaggerses, the Moody's, the Crumps, and I could go on. These were the people that paved the way for the Bonnieville Bombers. Stanley would have none of it. He said, I was a pretty fair pitcher, but I could never, wasn't close to Freddie or JD or Ray. And we had a pretty good team, but we would never have been able to compete with the Bombers. A conversation that I thought was going to last 5 minutes was now nearing 2 hours. The stern look from some of the nurses and the fatigue on Stanley's face tells me it's time for me to say my goodbyes. And so I did. Now we all know there is no perfect way to say goodbye to a dying friend. But I believe, and I think Stanley's family would agree, this one was as close to perfect as you're ever going to get. 5 minutes later, I'm going down I-65. My windshield wipers at full blast. My mind running 100 miles an hour faster. I'm trying to relive this surreal conversation that I've just had. And I'm sitting there thinking, with all the things that had to be on Stanley's mind, financial affairs, his family, the things he was wanting to say to his grandkids, all of his friends. Why? Why would he be thinking about a softball team at a time like this? And then it hit me. It was so simple. It was just like a lightning rod went through me. Simple. The same reason my players have told me over and over again. Players' families, both the dads and the children's and the brothers and sisters. Time and time again, I've heard it from. I've heard it from the fans, the hardcore and the casual fan alike. Over and over and over again, I have heard these were the greatest days of our life. These were the most happiest days. These were the most memorable days of our life. And I just have to believe that some of Stanley's most happiest days was sitting in that third base bleachers on a cool, crispy Bonnieville evening, placing a sweater over Coquee's shoulders, getting ready to watch the Bombers play a game. It was then and there that I knew that this was a story that had to be told. If Stanley, who knew the game better than anybody that I'd ever talked to, still had questions that I had to answer, it's got to be a lot of people that are still wanting questions about how this team come together and how it started. Now, some of my ball players, in fact, several of them suggested, Coach, it's got to be a movie made of the Bombers. And it would be so simple and so easy for a screenwriter. All he'd have to do is take the facts. He wouldn't have to add any characters or take away any characters. All he'd have to do is take the facts and go through. And if the general public loved the Hoosiers, they would adore the Bombers. But I've always contended, no, there would be no way we would ever be able to do a movie of the Bombers. I mean, after all, who would we get to play me? Stop and think about it now. I mean, Robert Mitchum, John Wayne are dead. Robert Redford, Richard Gere, they're too old. Brad Pitt, George Clooney, not nearly good looking enough. So I guess we're going to be stuck with telling this story. And I can't think of a better place to tell it than right here where it all started in Bonnieville, Kentucky, where it all happened. And I can't think of a better audience to tell it to than you people right here who lived it, were a part of it. Kids that are now in their 40s to 50s that grew up being a part of it. And then we've got the grandkids that have just heard stories about it. They might have a thirst for knowledge, wanting to know just what it was like. So let's get started, shall we? Now, where do we start? Well, I guess if you would ask 25 players, you would get a different starting place. But with me, it started 61 years ago in 1950. Right here, real close, in fact, about 350 feet from here. I was trying to get acquainted with my new surroundings. Third grade class at Bonnieville Elementary. You see, the first 2 years living up in Hammondsville, back in the country, we had to take a school bus to Mumfordsville. They sent us to Mumfordsville. Bus pick us up about 6:15. Then we'd settle back for an hour and 45-minute bus ride. 357, which was a gravel road at that time, but it would intertwine, go back and forth, dirt roads, picking up kids. And I can't say that I enjoyed those first 2 years at Mumfordsville at all. And I think the main reason was that long bus ride. But then in 1949, somebody at the Hart County Board of Education came up with a great idea. At least I thought it was great. Why don't we send the kids from Hammondsville right down Bacon Creek, right down to Bonnieville? Seems like it would be a whole lot closer. The only thing we've got to negotiate would be those two bridges, one at Pikeview and one at Wabash. Little narrow bridges, only one car could go past at a time. And the school bus had about 2 inches on each side to get through. And in all those years, Harold Walters, Paul Swigler, Billy Highball never scraped the bus one time. So here I am sitting in this class and I'm looking and I'm thinking, that is the tallest teacher I've ever seen in my life. How tall is she? Her legs are taller than I am. Grace Crouch. She's sitting there and she's in control. Don't make me come back there. But boy, was she a sweetheart and a great teacher. Another thing I noticed was all these pretty little girls. I don't remember being that many pretty girls at Mumfordsville. This place is full of them. And I done learned some of them's name. Little blonde over here on the right, that's Diane Fry. That's her buddy behind her, Carolyn Hodges, Millie Ward, Mildred Highball, Betty Gay Jaggers or Betty Kay. I can't remember what they said on that middle name. It's either Betty Kay or Betty Gay. I'll figure it out later. I'll hear. Behind her, Janet Rogers. Whew, what a knockout, Janet Rogers. The little girl with the pigtails there in the back. Black-headed pigtails, Glenda Clark. And they all, and when you got up close to them, I mean, I was just mesmerized by them. You got up close to them, they smelled so good. I believe they took a bath every day. Now, whenever you lived in Hammondsville where we were at, you didn't get the opportunity to take a bath every day. No running water, no electricity. We would have to do what Mama would call a Mexican bath. Put a pan on the stove, and there you take an old wash pan, and you would just kind of hit the high spots, you know, and you'd get the best that you could. But the most important thing that you had to always remember is you had to get the ears. You had to get the ears good because Mama always checked the ears. She would, you had back behind the ears and in the ears. And if you didn't do it, she done it. And boy, did she hurt. I think Mama's only fear in life was that Daddy or I, one, would have to go to the hospital with dirty ears or dirty underwear. But back to these girls. They seem to be all dressed just exactly alike. They all got these white blouses buttoned all the way up to the top. They got these flannel skirts. They were, I don't know how to describe, they were multiply colored. They were red, white, green, blue, black. They were plaited. The hemline was just up above. Well, I tell you, they were the same kind of skirts them men over in Scotland wear when they play the bagpipes. They all had those on. And some of the guys says, you think those skirts are something? You ought to see when they put them poodle skirts on with 17 petticoats. But anyway, they had bobby socks. And they were rolled all the way down to their ankles. And they had penny loafers with dimes in them. And I'm sitting there thinking, boy, these girls are. I remember looking up at the ceiling, crossing my arms, thinking, yep, everything down here is going to be all right. And about that time, the school bell rung. And all the kids said, yay, they all jumped up. Recess, what? What's a recess? I don't remember us having a recess at Mumfordsville. I didn't know what a recess was. But anyway, I stood up and I followed them. And they all went running out in the hall. And I followed them. They went running down the hall. I followed them. Then they run out the north end of the building. I followed them. And when we got outside, all the boys turned right. All the girls turned left. I stood there, facing my first major decision of life. And for some reason, to this day, I don't know why, but I followed the boys. And the boys went out to this ball diamond, they call it, ball field, ballpark. And they started playing this game called fast pitch softball. I'd never seen it, never heard of it, didn't know what it was. I'm sitting there just intrigued by it. And I'm trying to learn the rules. And I got these little second and third graders already know the rules, and they're telling me about it. You know, they said the idea was to get 3 outs if you're on defense. And the way you do that, you have to catch the ball before it hits the ground, or if it hits the ground, you got to throw it over to what they call first base before they get there. And then you wanted to score runs if you were batting with this bat in your hand, so you wanted to, you hit it, you go to first, to second, to third, home, and if you stepped on home plate, you got a point or you got a run. I'm trying to figure this all out, and I'm watching, and you got to get 3 outs, okay? And I'm watching these kids, and they hit the ball and they'd run. And they run down to first, and they'd say, that's a single. They run down to second, they say, that's a double. They hit down to third, they said, that's a triple. If the guy run all the way around, that was a home run, okay? And now they're hitting the ball and running. I'm watching them hitting the ball and running. And then this one kid, he just throws his bat down and goes walking. And I said, now why isn't he running? Oh, he doesn't have to run. He's got 4 balls. Say that again. He does not have to run because he's got 4 balls. Well, it looks like to me then he should strut. They said, no, you don't understand. 3 strikes, you're out. 4 balls, you walk. Oh, so now I'm starting to get some more. Still things I couldn't understand. Why, when the ball hits the foul line, it's a fair ball? What? It was still some things in there that was confusing. But these 8th graders, these 8th grade boys come by, and they seen I was having trouble, and they wanted to help. And it was good of them to help. I mean, they explained things to me like 99 fouls, you were out. That every second time that you hit the ball, you had to slide into second base. And that if you hit the ball over the left fielder's head, you run the bases in reverse order. You start at third, second, first, and you come home. You know, I really appreciate them helping me and everything. Of course, later I figured out they were misinformed. But anyway, I will go home and I tell my daddy about this game, and he'd heard of it. He said, you know, your Uncle Charlie played it on the aircraft carrier. One of the planes were out in World War II, just a few years ago. So now I'm thinking about this game, and I'm going back and I'm watching. And every day they would choose up, just before books took up, they would choose up. It would be, I guess, the 2 best players would throw one the bat, and then they would start going up the bat, putting their hands through there, and it comes down to who could get the bat and who could throw it back over the shoulder 10 feet. He got to choose first. Then the other guy got to choose, and they would choose until they got to 9 players. All the time they were doing this, it was as kids sitting around, standing around, hoping to be chosen. Then it was some of us other kids standing around, hoping to be chosen also. Of course, we weren't going to be chosen. We didn't know enough about the game. We couldn't play very good. But we watched, and I go home, and I'm telling Dad about it, and he's telling me things, helping me with the rules. And I'm starting to learn more as I watch it every day, every day. And then one time it happened. All the boys, or a whole lot of the boys, got the mumps. And when the late bus road come by, I was on the late bus after the second bus come by, it wasn't enough to play out there. So this one guy looks and says, hey, you want to play? I said, yeah. He said, go to right field, go to right field. So I go running out to right field, and I'm standing out there, and here comes this kid, Gerald Cottrell. And he says, you'll need a glove. So I take and I put the glove on, and I'm thinking, please, Lord, don't let them hit one out here. Don't let them hit one out here. And he answered my prayers. They didn't hit one. But then we go in to bat. And they said, okay, Skaggs, you're up. And here I'd never batted before. And I get to bat, and I go up, and I swing and I miss. And I swing and I miss again. I'm not getting close. And out there in the field, they saying, well, he swings like an old washwoman. Never did figure out what that meant. But anyway, I struck out, and I was so disappointed. Other team was laughing. My guys, they didn't say anything, but they were disappointed in me too. And I waited. I thought, when is that bus going to get here? I'm ready to get out of here. Seemed like the bus was late. I had to go out and play another inning. Luckily, they didn't hit me the ball. Now I get on the bus, and I'm going home, and I'm thinking about it. And that night for supper, I don't think I even touched my taters or maters. Eat just a very few beans. And Dad said, what's the matter, horsefly? You look blue. I said, well, Daddy, I got to play today. Really? Well, that's good. And I said, well, no, I got to bat and I struck out. Don't worry about that, Daddy. He said, do you know who has struck out more than anybody else in baseball? No. Babe Ruth. The same guy's hit more home runs than anybody else. See, you can't be worried about failure in life. You have to fail before you can succeed. So don't worry. And on top of that, you know what we're going to do? This Saturday when we do the chores, when we get done, I'm going to give you some batting practice. You're going to learn how to hit. It will be easy. It will be no problem. So I go back the rest of the week, and on Saturday come, and we went and we milked the cows, fed the mules and the chickens, gathered the eggs, crushed up some corn for the mules. Dad said, you ready to take some batting practice? And I was ready, but I'm sitting there thinking, how are we going to do this? I don't have a bat, don't have a ball. And he takes me up to the barn, and he hands me a tobacco stick. And then he goes over and he gathers himself up some corn cobs. And he started throwing corn cobs. He looked, he said, oh, you're left-handed? That's great, that's great. Best hitters are left-handed. Then he showed me how to put my feet, and we started working. And boy, it wasn't long, I started hitting them corn cobs. And he told me, he said, son, I want to tell you this. You learn to hit those corn cobs with this tobacco stick, you'll be able to hit any man alive. And man, was he right. In my career, I faced the greatest pitchers in Kentucky. Dean Poore, Bob Spencer, Ray Smiley, J.D. Frazier. I faced some of the nation's best. Men that went to the National Hall of Fame of the first minute. People like Bonnie Jones, Harvey Sturkle, Mitch Harden. And I'm going to tell you, it wasn't none of them. None of them could make that softball do what Dad could make them corn cobs do. And I guess that was the style of hitting that I used the rest of my life. Compact, short stroke, hit the ball late, drive it to left field. Now, after hitting those corn cobs, I couldn't wait to get back. I was unlucky. It went a week. Nobody would choose me. On the end, I'm up front. They wouldn't choose me. And then, thank goodness, the guys come down with the measles. A bunch of guys comes down with the measles. Now they got no choice. And I'm sitting out there, and this guy says, you want to play? Yeah, go out to right field. I borrowed somebody's glove. I go out to right field. I'm still praying, please don't let them hit one out here. But when that inning was over, I want to know, when do I bat? When do I bat? Oh, you bat fourth. That means somebody's got to get on base. Luckily, two guys got on base. I come up to bat, and that first pitch, I drilled it. Shot to left center, between the left fielder and the center fielder. Now the kids were getting ready to find out something else about me. I could run, and I knew I could run. Running through the wheat fields and the corn fields and the tobacco patches of Kentucky barefooted, had built those. My dad used to say, I don't know where in the world you got that stride. You never got that stride from the Skaggses or the Druins. The only place I can figure it out, you got it from your great-grandma Rachel, full-blooded Cherokee. That's the only place you could have come up with that stride. But anyway, whenever I rounded first, the guy on first hadn't even touched second. And now, whenever I touch second, he's only about halfway to third. And I'm running over there, and here this third base coach is telling him to go on in, but telling me to hold up. Yeah, right. If he can make it, I can make it. And whenever I come right behind him, I had to wait on him, and the ball comes sailing by. He steps on home plate, and I step on home plate. And all my teammates were so happy. It was amazing how you change on one swing of a bat. What you're perceived by your peers on one swing of a bat. Now, all of a sudden I got being chosen. And I wasn't chosen last either. I was chosen like fifth or sixth. And I'm learning how to play defense. And these kids were helpful. Any high ball would come by. Why? You don't do that. Don't do what? You don't throw the ball hard when you first warm up. You throw easy. You don't want to burn your arm out. Donnie Clausen would say, below the waist, you turn your glove this way. Above your waist, you turn it this way. They're helping me. And then I'm learning. And then one day I'm playing third base. And the guy at bat is the best third baseman around. His name is Wayne Walters. And I'm sitting there knowing that he hits the ball right down here. And I'm using his glove. I'm borrowing his glove. And I'm sitting there thinking, I better be ready. He's going to hit it here. And he does. He hits a shot. And I didn't even have time to think. I just jumped and held up the glove, and it hit right in the glove. Oh, what an exhilarating feeling. But it seemed like I come down in slow motion. Before I even come down, my teammates was already hollering, hey, good catch, way to go, Skaggs. I hit the ground, I don't know what to do. It's a third out. I'm standing there holding the ball, and they're running off the field. Then I happen to remember, oh, you take the ball and you roll it out to the pitching rubber. But I'm still there with Wayne's glove, and he's standing up at home plate. He'd hit it so hard that by the time I caught it, he hadn't took a step, and he's still standing there with that bat in his hand. And I'm thinking, surely you won't hit me with that bat. But I got to get him his glove. And I run up there, and I handed him his glove, and he just looked at me and smiled. He said, great catch, Skaggs, great catch. Oh, I feel so great. I can't wait to get home to tell my daddy. I cannot wait. I got to tell him about this catch. I can't wait. The bus shows up late. What's wrong with him? Then I get on the bus, and it looks like he just piddle-paddles around, driving home. He's looking at the cattle. He's checking out how many people, how they're doing on their corn crop. He is so slow, and I'm thinking, hurry up. I mean, even I can look and see a bad cloud's coming. Well, finally, I got home. And just as he let me off the bus, there was a thunder and lightning, and a rain started coming down, and I sprinted the half a mile across the blacktop, across the footlog, into the house. But Daddy wasn't there. My daddy was gone. It seemed that day, our landlord's bull had fell in love with a neighbor's heifer. And no barbed wire fence was going to keep this love affair from happening. So there was my daddy at the back of the fence with the rain coming up, with a lantern, with a homemade wire stretcher, with some hammers and nails and staples, trying to repair a fence. Mama reckoned we ought to go ahead and eat the supper. Said he'll probably be back there for a while. That old horny Clyde, he made a big hole in that fence. Yeah, the bull's name was Clyde. He had horns. I guess that's the reason they called him Horny Clyde. But anyway, we eat, and then we got done, and Dad hadn't got back, and Mama started getting worried. And she come in there. She went and got a clock out of their bedroom. And she set it down. She said, I'm worried about your daddy. He should have been back here by now. You see this clock? You see that one right there? Yeah. I'm going to go back and check on your daddy. And if that clock gets 4 and I haven't got back, I want you to put your cap and your coat on, and I want you to walk across to Mr. Leighton Turner's. And I want you to tell him that you think your daddy is sick and that your mama's with him at the back end of the field and he needs to bring the Jeep. Can you do that? Yes, Mama, I can do that. But about that time, there was a lantern walking, and Mama said, praise the Lord, there's your daddy, that's fine. She runs in the closet and she gets out his overalls and she turns them wrong side outwards and she says, here, now you hold these up against the fire for Daddy whenever he comes in. And I said, okay, and now she goes and she starts taking the leftovers that we'd eat for supper and she starts heating them up. She comes back in and she gets the overalls and she turns them back and she meets Dad when he opens the door and she says, Merle, goodness gracious sakes alive, you look like an old wet hen. Get out of them wet breeches, put these new breeches on. You didn't even wear your cap. You're going to be sick. What little we've got saved up, we're going to have to give Dr. Rout to get you well again. You know better than going out without your cap. Sit down there and eat. Has your asthma act up? Did you get the fence fixed? And finally, Dad got to eat his supper. And when he got through eating his supper, he walked into the room where I was at. And he said, how was school today? And I said, Dad, I got to tell you, Today I was playing third base. And the guy at bat is the best third baseman around. His name is Wayne Walters. And Wayne is up there, and I knew he hits down where I was at, so I was getting ready. And all of a sudden he hits the ball. And I jumped, and Dad was turning white. Dad was struggling. His eyes was turning white. He was having trouble breathing. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't do anything. I just looked at him. And he's choking. And I just watched. And finally, he cleared his throat. And he looked at me and he said, "Son, what are you doing for a ball glove?" Somehow, the impact of that question, even though I was only 8 years old, registered right through to me, and I understood it. Here was a man talking to his only child, his only son, who dearly loved the game he's just learned, and now Dad realizes that he doesn't have the proper equipment. And to make things worse, he doesn't have the resources to do anything about it. But as far as I was concerned, my daddy was worth a whole lot more than a ball glove. And I didn't want him to worry about it. So I answered the best way I could. I said, "Daddy, look, it's no big deal. I mean, you know, it's some other kids there don't have a glove either. And what we do, you know, when we go out and the other team comes in, if I'm playing the infield, I'll just borrow a glove from Wayne, Lenny Highball, Donald Butler. If I'm playing the outfield, I'll borrow a glove from Donnie Clausen, Leon Jaggers, Gerald Cottrell." Dad shook his head and got up, walked into the kitchen, went to the water bucket, dipped him 3 dippers full of water into a pan and washed his face. Then he went and just stared out the window for what seemed like 10 or 15 minutes. And I'm sitting there thinking, is that the difference between poor and rich? Whether you have a ball glove or not? And now today I sit back and I think about those days. And I think about those kids that I played with. And not one time do I ever remember anybody being ridiculed because they didn't have a glove. Not one time do I ever remember anybody refusing to loan a glove to another kid. I think that says something about those kids I went to school with, and the parents that raised them, and the teachers and administrators of that school. Finally, Dad walked back in the room. He had a fruit jar, a butcher knife. And he set them down, he reached into his pocket, and he showed me something I'd never seen before, a quarter. A quarter. Now, I'd seen pennies, I'd seen nickels, and I'd seen dimes, but I'd never seen a quarter. And Dad, I'd seen a lot of dimes, because the dimes was what they give me, and I put it in my watch pocket, and when I go to school to pay for my lunch. School lunch program went through the administration in 1946. In Kentucky in 1948 was the first year that it was implemented. And that was the first year that I went to school at Mumfordsville. You would take this dime and you would go and give it to your teacher, Miss Bucket. She in turn would hand you a red poker chip. That's what it was, a red poker chip. I didn't know what it was. Later on in life, I figured that one out. But you would take that poker chip, you put it in your pocket, and when the lunch bell would ring, you'd run out the building, over to the gym, down inside the lunchroom, and you would hand that poker chip to a lady there. And she would put it in a cigar box, and you could go in and eat. In 1948, the way the lunch program was set up, you could bring a dime, you could eat the lunch at school, you could bring your lunch. If you lived close, you could walk home to eat, or you could do without. And there was 3 kids in my classroom in the 1st grade that seemed to have to do with that every day. One of them was this kid named Larry. And I was talking to Larry, and some of the other kids come up, "Why are you talking to him? Why not?" "Well, nobody talks to him." "Well, why?" "He's so stupid. You know, he's supposed to be in the 3rd grade. He don't have any friends." Well, it looked like to me, if he don't have any friends, he needs one. I guess, as I was thinking about that the other day, I never did ever walk to anybody else's drummer. Kind of done things the way I wanted to do them. And I thought Larry needed a friend. So I would talk to Larry. Now, one of the lunches that they had, one of my favorites, was on Wednesday. You got a bowl of chili, and you got this great big crackers and cheese. Big slice of cheese and crackers. And then they would give you this big red apple. Most of the kids decided that they would eat that apple a little later. They were full after eating their cheese and chili. So they take the apple back to the room with them. So I come walking back one day with my apple, and there's Larry, and he's watching my hand. He's got his eyes right on the apple. Wherever my arm is swinging, he's looking at that apple. And I stopped, and he says, "Randy, that sure is a pretty apple, isn't it?" I said, yeah, it's pretty. You want it?" "Yeah, can I have it?" And I pitched him an apple. He caught it, and it looked like he just inhaled it. The whole big apple is gone. It's nothing in his hands. It's all in his mouth. He's eating core, stem, and all. He's just eating. And I says, "Good, Larry?" "Real good. Real good." So every Wednesday I'd bring him the apple, and every once in a while we'd have a pear, a peach, banana, and I'd give it to Larry. And then one day it happened, as it has to all kids. Any kids ever played on the playground, you get called down by the bully. We had a 3rd grade bully at that time who loved to pick on 1st and 2nd graders. Thing he would do would come up to you. He'd place a little piece of wood on his shoulder, and he'd tell you to knock it off. And if you knocked it off, then he just beat the devil out of you. If you did knock it off, he would tell you what a coward you was. And he would get the other kids to say, even kids that didn't like him, he'd say, "Tell him he's a coward, tell him he's a coward." Well, they were scared not to, so they'd say, "You're a coward, you're a coward." So here he goes. I'd seen all this before, and there he is placing it on his shoulder. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, I'm not going to be a coward. Whew, I know this is going to hurt. I'm trying not to pee in my pants. And I'm thinking, how am I going to knock this off? I'm not just going to reach up there and knock it off like the other kids. If I'm going to get beat up, I'm going to get a lick in it. Am I going to hit him in the belly, or am I going to hit him in the mouth? Which way am I going to go? Well, before I could decide, somebody comes running by me, pow, right in the mouth, and right on top of me, and go, pow, 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 pow. Just 8 or 10 punches, one right after another. And then some of these big 8th graders come and was pulling him off. And when they pulled him off, he kicked again. Then he just pushed those 8th graders out of the way, and he said, "Don't you ever pick on my buddy again." Yeah, you heard the story. Apple a day will keep the doctor away. An apple a week will make the bully retreat. And seemed like Larry picked up a few friends after that. Kids thought he was all right. It was about that time a story was circulating that it was a guy around Mumfordsville, done a little mathematics. He was thinking, he had 3 children. I'm sending them to school, and it costs 10 cents each for their lunch, 30 cents. But I can go to the 5 and 10 cent store, and I can buy 100 red poker chips for $1. And now, that would only cost me 3 cents a day instead of 30 cents. So that story got out, and these poor 3 children, everybody kind of thumbed their nose at them. Nobody wanted to talk about them. I go home and I tell Daddy about this, and Daddy says, "You got to be very careful here. First of all, those 3 children, if it is true, cannot help it. So you don't ever treat anybody any different. But the most important thing there is, more than likely, this story is not true. You see, it's a lot of people in this world, Horsefly, that loves to run their mouth. They like to talk. And they like to tell things that are not true. You know, I could go over to the store right now and I could say, did you guys know that Mr. Webb and his 2 boys went and cut and housed and stripped Martha's tobacco after her husband was dead? They wouldn't be too interested in hearing that. That word would never get around. But if I went over there and I said, you know, I believe last Sunday at church, I smelled liquor on Mr. Webb's breath. In no time, that story would circulate everywhere. What a drunk he is. So people like to talk, and they can hurt people. Oh, I've seen churches broke up because of people's tongue. I've seen families broke up. I've seen great friendships. I've seen business broken up just because of the tongue. So you try in your life to stay away and not get involved with that. The worst thing is these people that do all the talking, their life is so miserable. I mean, most of them are not too work-brickle. They're not willing to do the things you have to do to climb the ladder of success. So they'd rather just stay down here at the bottom and criticize those people that's made it to the top or is trying to make it to the top. One thing you always remember, son, any jackass can kick